Release the leash before that beast rips someone's face off. Sergeant Marcus Bennett's voice dripped with contempt as the gun trembled in his hand, a sick pleasure disguised as authority. "It was to be expected," he sneered. "You never know how to control what you have." Beside them, Corporal Travis Miller laughed, cell phone in hand, ready to record the spectacle. Before them, the German shepherd Thor remained motionless, muscles tense, gaze fixed, the very definition of obedience. The response came in a cold and unyielding tone. "He's trained. Don't do that." The voice belonged to Captain Rebecca Hayes, and each word carried years of discipline. But the shot came before thought. The bang cut through the air. Thor collapsed beside her, his collar hitting the dry earth, while blood began to stain the ground. Sergeant Bennett rested his gleaming boot on the dog's body and smiled, the kind of smile only someone who confuses uniform with power can give. The silence that followed wasn't one of fear, it was one of promise. He thought he had won, but what he did at that moment was declare war against someone who knew exactly how to bring down men like him. Before we continue this story, please comment on which city or country you are watching from, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This is just the first twist in a story that will surprise you. The morning sun cast long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of Meadowbrook, a haven of high walls and measured silence in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. Rebecca Hayes walked with firm steps, her worn grey sweatshirt fluttering slightly in the wind. Behind her thick-rimmed glasses, she kept her gaze straight ahead, the perfect portrait of a quiet librarian on her morning walk. Beside her, Thor, the imposing German shepherd, moved with military precision. Each step reflected the rigorous training they both shared, alert but calm, attentive to everything, threatening nothing. The leash hung loosely between them, unnecessary, but required by local law. Children's laughter cut through the crisp air. Two boys played ball in the front garden while their father watered the rose bushes. The sound of the sprinklers created an ephemeral rainbow under the golden light. It was perfect suburban peace, and Rebecca knew she shouldn't trust any peace. As they turned the corner of Oak Street and Maple Avenue, Jennifer Walsh stood in her driveway, her cell phone in one hand and her 7-year-old son, Dylan, in the other. Her eyes narrowed at the sight of them. Her lips formed a hard line of disapproval. "Dylan, come here now," she hissed, pulling the boy behind her. Her fingers slid across the phone screen, quick and decisive. Rebecca continued walking calmly, but she heard a whisper laden with panic and prejudice. "Yes, it's an emergency. There's an aggressive dog on our street. The owner can't control it." Jennifer's voice echoed through the clear morning air. "Yes, a huge German shepherd. She's being completely adamant. I don't feel safe." Thor's ears twitched at the sound of the approaching sirens, but he remained steadfast beside her. The cold metal of the watch, with its hidden microphone pressed against Rebecca's wrist, a habit she had never abandoned, not even after years of retirement. 3 vehicles appeared, turning the corner, their tires screeching against the asphalt. In seconds, they formed a semicircle around her. Their red and blue lights flashed like signals of war. Sergeant Marcus Bennett got out of the lead car, his hand already on his weapon. Behind him, Corporal Travis Miller followed, his palm resting precariously close to the holster. "Control that beast!" Bennett shouted, his voice vibrating with excitement. The gun barrel rose. Rebecca slowly raised her hands. "Sir, my dog is on a leash and under control. He is a trained service dog." Thor sat down immediately, his posture perfect, his focus solely on her. But Bennett wasn't looking at the dog. He was looking at the power of someone who could kill with impunity. "I told you to unleash that beast," he roared, his finger firmly on the trigger. "He's sitting down," Rebecca replied, with the calm of someone who has dealt with men like that before. "There's no need for weapons. I have his documents." "Shut up," Bennett interrupted. "That animal is aggressive. You can see it in its eyes." Neighbors began to emerge from their homes. Cell phones were raised. Jennifer Walsh remained at the door, holding her son in one hand and pointing with the other. "That dog keeps threatening the children." "I already complained," she lied, without blinking. Thor's ears perked up, attentive to the sound of the voices. And that was enough. 3 shots cut through the air. Thor's body trembled. His eyes met Rebecca's for a final moment, steady, calm, unbreakable, before he collapsed onto the green grass. Blood splattered, staining the scene of perfection. "Face down, on the ground now," Bennett yelled, pointing the gun. Rebecca obeyed without resistance, lying down with the same dignity as a soldier who knows the value of silence. The handcuffs tightened violently around her wrists, leaving red marks. With her face pressed against the ground, she saw Thor's blood trickling down a few meters away. Bennett laughed. Another threat neutralized. "You saw that, right? The beast was going to attack." The others nodded, already crafting their lies. But none of them noticed the slight movement of Rebecca's lips, a whisper, almost inaudible. Hidden protocol. Activated. While neighbors filmed from afar and the sun rose mercilessly, the entire neighborhood witnessed the death of a comrade who had survived war zones, only to fall into the hands of those he was supposed to protect. And there, amid screams, cameras, and silence, lay a woman who was much more than she appeared to be. When she was finally released, Rebecca Hayes walked the 8 blocks to her house. The afternoon sun beat down on her shoulders. The marks from the handcuffs still burned into her wrists, but her step remained firm. She didn't look back. It wasn't even necessary. Whoever started that war had no idea who they were dealing with. The neighbors would peek from behind the curtains or look away as soon as Rebecca Hayes walked by. Some hurriedly called their children, locking doors as if the pain could spread through the air. Mrs. Helen Crawford, who used to wave from the garden while tending to the orchids, now pretended to be too focused on pruning the rose bushes. Mr. Arthur Thompson, who previously offered treats to Thor over the fence, closed the windows without saying a word. The dried blood on the lawn had darkened, turning into a brown stain that marred the perfection of the green. 3 bullet casings still glistened in the sun. The police hadn't even bothered to collect the evidence. The yellow crime scene tape fluttered on a nearby bush, torn and forgotten. Rebecca climbed the steps to the porch. Each boot print left by the police was a reminder, dirty trails of blood on the floor Thor used to watch over. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the key, the only outward sign of the fury contained in every fiber of her body. The click of the lock echoed, and she locked the 4 latches behind her. The silence in the house was unbearable. The sound of Thor's fingernails on the wooden floor was missing, as was the soft breathing beside the sofa, the rhythmic patting of his bottom against her legs. The water bowl still rested half full near the kitchen door. The wind-up toy lay forgotten under the coffee table. Rebecca moved with mechanical precision. She closed all the blinds, locked every window, turned off the lights. The morning ration still awaited in the bowl. She picked it up with trembling hands. Each grain was a reminder of what they had lost. The reinforced basement door creaked as she descended. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary woman's storage room, boxes of winter clothes, old books, Christmas decorations. But Rebecca walked to the farthest corner, where a concrete wall concealed something few would imagine. His fingers pressed on 2 specific points. A dry snap. The panel slid smoothly, revealing a hidden space. Inside, there was no dust, nor was there any forgetfulness, just discipline. Weapons neatly lined one wall, modified rifles, tactical shotguns, clean and loaded pistols. On the opposite side, a workbench held drones, directional microphones, thermal imagers, and state-of-the-art surveillance equipment. A metal cabinet held forged documents, field IDs, and encrypted radios. Rebecca removed her grey sweatshirt, revealing arms covered in special tactical force tattoos. Each symbol told of a mission, a scar, a life left behind. The slight limp she feigned daily disappeared, replaced by the straight, precise posture of someone trained to kill and survive. The computer monitor lit up, and an encrypted message appeared on the screen. It was from Captain Victoria Kane, her former partner in operations. They know. Soon the images came, reports, surveillance photos, bank transfers. Amidst the data, the name of Colonel Raymond Fisher appeared repeatedly, linked to a web of arms, smuggling and money laundering within the corporation itself. The evidence was clear. Seized weapons were disappearing from police depots and reappearing in the hands of private security companies. The so-called incidents involving aggressive dogs served as a front. Authorized raids, clean executions, perfect cover. Victoria's message continued. 7 similar cases in the last month. Same team. Same protocol. Yours was the 8th. Thor wasn't a mistake. It was a message. A loud bang echoed in his memory. The sound of the gunshot. Thor's body falling. She remembered the night missions, the rescues, the weight of the dog pressing against her leg before the advance. Thor wasn't an animal. He was the last link between the past and what still kept her standing. New coordinates appeared on the screen, along with the time, 10 cool p.m. Rebecca understood immediately. It was a callback. He opened the locked cabinet and took out the tactical knife with its carbon steel blade, the same one he had carried in 3 international operations. The handle bore the same markings as the tattoos on his arm, the unit's symbol. She placed it on the counter next to Thor's collar. The leather still held the warmth of the morning sun. "They started this war," he murmured, his voice sharp as a blade. The distant sound of children playing came through the small basement window. The parents seemed relieved. The threat, according to them, had disappeared. Rebecca Hayes knew better. The real threat was only beginning. Jennifer Walsh's shrill voice echoed through the yard, already transforming the morning's horror into late afternoon gossip. Each word was laden with venom and feigned indignation, spreading through the houses of the Meadowbrook neighborhood like smoke. Deep underground, Rebecca Hayes stood motionless amidst the weapons and the memory of Thor. Between the librarian her neighbors thought they knew and the lethal agent the country had forgotten, she was now a tense link between 2 incompatible lives. The collar tags reflected the cold LED light onto the workbench. The name Thor, engraved in the metal, seemed to pulse with the same weight as the memory of his death. On the computer screen, new messages from Captain Victoria Kane appeared every second. Data, spreadsheets, confidential reports, everything pointed in the same direction: corruption, trafficking, and carefully covered-up murders. Each file was a piece of a macabre puzzle. Thor's death was not a mistake. It was a warning. They killed him to test how much she could endure, and they underestimated the wrong woman. They thought they were dealing with a reserved librarian, a lonely widow with a dog. They had no idea they had awakened a former member of the Special Tactical Force, trained to disarm governments and eliminate invisible threats. They took her partner away to send a message. Now she would send hers. The fluorescent lights of Meadowbrook's 5th precinct buzzed as Rebecca walked through the glass doors. She wore a navy blue pencil skirt, a beige blazer, and flats. Her hair was pulled back. She wore thick glasses, and her voice was soft, the perfect facade of an ordinary woman. The reception sergeant barely looked up from the monitor. "Can I help?" he murmured, without taking his fingers off the keyboard. "I am requesting the body camera footage from this morning's incident at 1847 Oak Street." Her tone was serene, almost sweet. The police officer raised his eyebrows, recognizing the case. "Ah, the dog thing. Wait a minute." He made a quick call, and a few seconds later, Lieutenant Daniel Pierce emerged from a side door. His impeccable uniform and rehearsed smile gave him away. Press officer, specialist in diffusing scandals. "Good afternoon, Ms. Hayes. This is Lieutenant Pierce. Let's talk inside, please." He indicated a small waiting room, positioning himself discreetly between it and the main corridor, blocking the view. A space control technique, an intimidation technique. She recognized the method. She had taught it to recruits years ago. "I understand that you want to see the recordings," Pierce began in a conciliatory voice. "But unfortunately, there was a technical glitch during the incident." Rebecca maintained a neutral gaze. "Sergeant Marcus Bennett's body camera stopped recording before the shot was fired. Is that correct?" The lieutenant smiled without emotion. "Actually, all 3 police officers' cameras malfunctioned. An unfortunate coincidence." She observed the micro-expressions, the slight tremor of the eyelid, the tension in the jaw, the kind of lie one practices to disguise but never truly masters. "Technical problems happen, Ms. Hayes. Our officers responded to a legitimate threat. Losing a pet is terrible, but protocol was followed." Through the gap between them, Rebecca saw Sergeant Bennett sitting at the table, chuckling softly. Their eyes met. "Hey, lady, still wearing the collar?" he mocked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Pierce's smile faltered. "That's enough, Sergeant." Rebecca turned slowly, facing Bennett. The air seemed thin. "You should have finished the job." The phrase echoed through the room like a blade. His laughter vanished in an instant. Pierce took a step forward, forcing the tension back under control. "I think we're finished, Ms. Hayes, unless you want to file a formal complaint." The tone was polished, but the subtext was clear. This will lead nowhere. She adjusted her glasses. "No, thank you. I understand everything now." And he left with the calm of someone about to rewrite history. The night air was colder when he walked through the gate. On the opposite sidewalk, a black SUV without license plates waited with its engine running. As soon as she started walking, the car moved slowly, keeping its distance. Amateurs. She turned onto Willow Drive, then cut through an alley behind Mr. Patterson's hardware store. The vehicle would have to turn around. She took the opportunity to enter through the side of a closed antique shop, watching in the reflection of the window as the car slowly passed by, searching for her. Rebecca Hayes's discreet smile returned to her lips. They thought they were in charge. But that night, the silent hunt had just changed sides. Rebecca Hayes moved with the precision of someone who had learned to survive in areas where one mistake could cost lives. Her steps were quick, calculated. At each corner she made small turns, circled back in alleys, used the reflection in shop windows to identify suspicious movements. No gesture was random. Everything was part of an invisible pattern, that of a hunter who had learned to appear prey. The sun was setting as she approached the house from the back, crossing the sparse woods that separated her property from the Meadowbrook hills. Since the morning's incident, Rebecca had installed motion-activated cameras around the entire perimeter, equipment from Secure Tech Systems, calibrated to detect anything larger than a raccoon. Your cell phone vibrated. The security app displayed infrared images captured 20 minutes earlier. A figure standing at the back door, testing the doorknob, then moving to check the windows. They were testing their defenses. Rebecca entered through a side door, removing her shoes without making a sound. The house was plunged into darkness, cold, silent, still, exactly as she had left it. He moved like a ghost between the rooms, his eyes fixed on every shadow. Nothing was out of place, but instinct was screaming. There were subtle signs, a slight scratch on the back step, a nearly faded fingerprint on the glass. Someone had been there and would return. In the dim light of the room, he sat silently, the tactical knife firmly in his hand. The blade reflected the little light that escaped through the blinds. "Come back any time," he murmured with a half-smile. "I dare you." Hours later, dawn filtered over the Wilmington industrial port, covering the rusty containers with a dense, salty fog. The distant sound of seagulls mingled with the rustling of the wind among the abandoned cranes. Rebecca's black SUV glided discreetly through the metal maze, its tires screeching on the cracked concrete. She had already changed vehicles 3 times since leaving the house. No trace, not a shadow in the rearview mirror. The smell of sea air and rust filled the air as I parked behind a stack of containers. His boots touched the ground without making a sound. The tension in the place was familiar, the kind of silence that precedes crossfire. Captain Victoria Kane awaited her, leaning against a rust-stained container. His body was rigid, his posture still military despite his limp. His eyes scanned his surroundings relentlessly. "You weren't followed?" he asked, his voice hoarse, marked by years of command. "Clean route," Rebecca replied. 3 car changes, 2 false leads." Victoria nodded, a flicker of approval breaking her stern expression. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "It's worse than we thought." Rebecca noticed the slight tremor in her former companion's hand. Victoria Kane wasn't trembling at all, and the fact that she was trembling said it all. "Colonel Raymond Fisher turned the evidence repository into a private arsenal," he whispered. "The seized weapons disappear from the records, reappear in the hands of private companies and militias, some with direct connections to cartels." Her voice cracked. Thor sensed something in one of those shipments. It became a threat. They used a neighbor's complaint as a cover. Rebecca nodded, her eyes fixed on the misty horizon. It was all planned. Exactly. Victoria took a deep breath, the dark gaze turning to her. But there's something worse. They're not dealing with ordinary pistols or rifles. We're talking about military weaponry, tactical drones, sniper rifles, portable missiles. The muffled sound of a gunshot interrupted the sentence. Victoria barely had time to push Rebecca aside. The bullet meant for her head struck the captain in the chest. Blood splattered against the container, staining the faded lettering. Rebecca reacted even before the body touched the ground. 3 shots came from different angles, controlled rhythm, synchronized, professionals. She rolled behind a pile of pallets, the concrete shattering around her. The first shooter was just over 4 meters high. Illusory advantage. Rebecca climbed the containers with feline agility, moving through his blind spot. The blade flashed only once. The body fell with a dry sound. Without hesitation, he took the silenced rifle from the man and checked the chamber with automatic movements. 2 shots. One in the throat, another in the center of the second shooter's chest. He fell like a severed puppet. The echo of the gunshots was lost in the fog, and for a moment only the sound of the sea answered. Rebecca Hayes wiped the blood from the blade onto the vest of one of the bodies and gazed at the reddened horizon. The war they had started now had a new leader. The third shooter was more experienced. He changed position with each shot, controlling the fire and keeping Rebecca Hayes pinned behind a stack of containers. But she hadn't survived a decade of operational missions playing fair. With precise movements, he pulled a small magnesium flare from his boot, an unconventional item, but one that had already saved his life more than once. He rolled the device to the enemy's last known position and closed his eyes. The flash was instantaneous, white, violent. The fog dissolved into a wall of pure light. The man's scream revealed their location before he could react. 2 short shots. Silence. When the echo ceased, Rebecca was already beside the body of Captain Victoria Kane, lying in a growing pool of blood. Her friend's breathing was irregular, her chest rising and falling in short spasms. The bullet had struck something vital. "Tunnel," Victoria murmured, gripping Rebecca's arm with the strength of someone who knows she's dying. "Under the shed. Go. Now." Rebecca found the rusty hatch under a pile of rubble. Everything about her screamed to follow protocol, check the flanks, clear the perimeter. But her friend's time was running out. He carried her down the stairs, her lifeless body weighing heavily on his shoulders. The tunnel led to a small concrete room. Emergency lights cast a sickly greenish hue onto shelves of medical supplies and boxes of tactical equipment. Rebecca laid Victoria down carefully, but one look was enough to know. There was no saving her. "I warned you," Victoria coughed, blood staining her teeth. "They're all corrupt, the whole command." "Stay still, save your strength. They're going to burn everything down, Rebecca. The weapons are just the beginning." His hand grip weakened. "Burn them all." "It didn't." Those were the last words before life faded from his eyes. For a moment, Rebecca stood motionless, the sound of emergency lights buzzing around her. Then, with a gentle gesture, he closed his companion's eyes. There was nothing more to say. Blood trickled down her fingers, dripping onto the concrete floor in a steady rhythm, the metronome of revenge. The journey back to Meadowbrook was automatic. Her body moved on its own, guided by instinct, while her mind burned in silence. He had lost colleagues before, but never at home. Now the enemy didn't wear uniforms. They wore badges. The street was, as always, silent, perfect, hypocritical. But the front door of his house was ajar. Clear message. Rebecca pulled out her gun and leaned against the wall. Silence. They had already left. He entered carefully. No trigger wire, no visible trap. Everything in its proper place. The books lined up, the china intact, the same false peace. Until you can smell the burning paper. The fireplace was still smoking. Among the ashes lay the remains of his life. The medals of honor, the Purple Heart, the Distinguished Service Cross, all melted into a shapeless heap. Thor's photos from puppy to war dog rolled up and charred. Not even the documents escaped. It wasn't vandalism, it was a message. You have no past, you have no proof, you are nothing. Rebecca took a deep breath, taming the hatred that burned beneath her skin. Anger blinds, anger kills. With measured steps, he crossed the corridor, counting the planks until he reached the exact spot. He pressed against the wall, and the hidden panel opened, revealing a steel chest. He spun the combination without hesitation. Thor's birthday. The sound of the padlock being released was almost ceremonial. Inside awaited the tools of a life she had vowed never to touch again. Black tactical gear, reinforced boots, ceramic vest, smoke grenades, and demolition charges. Everything perfectly clean, lubricated and ready. Deep inside, in a waterproof case, was his special tactical force identification, the only piece of his history that the fire didn't destroy. She dressed with the precision of someone reconnecting with their own essence. The uniform molded to the body like a second skin. Every buckle, every holster, every movement was familiar. The librarian had disappeared. Rebecca Hayes looked at her reflection in the mirror, and for the first time in a long time, he saw who he really was. Rebecca Hayes braided her hair close to her scalp, just as she did on every royal mission. Not a single loose strand, no distractions. The reinforced basement of his house, which for years had served only as an emergency shelter, now pulsed like a true operations center. Soundproof walls, backup generator, 3 independent internet lines routed through anonymous servers abroad. Monitors displaying real-time images from micro cameras installed around the property. Everything was prepared for what she had sworn she would never do again, return to the countryside. The main computer lit up, bathing the room in shades of blue and green. Rebecca's fingers glided across the keyboard with the agility of someone who had transformed digital chaos into art. The Charlotte Police Department's network was no challenge. It penetrated the firewall like fog, creating invisible access points, traces that even the most experienced experts couldn't find. The files opened one by one. Agent registrations, patrol schedules, radio logs. Then a photo filled the screen. The face of Sergeant Marcus Bennett, the same mocking smile she had never forgotten. His disciplinary record was a parade of impunity. Allegations of violence, internal complaints, 2 ex-wives with protective orders dismissed. And all incidents were closed by Colonel Raymond Fisher. Bennett wasn't just a violent cop. He was a tool in the hands of the system, a dog trained to get its hands dirty for someone who would never be investigated. Rebecca cross-referenced the GPS data from the vehicles with the records from the cell towers. The sergeant's routine emerged in seconds. The same bars, the same nighttime routes, the same addresses visited off-duty. A red dot started flashing on the screen. Sergeant Bennett located at the Blue Line Bar in downtown Meadowbrook. A bar frequented by police officers, the kind of place where alcohol is used to wash away one's conscience. He was probably celebrating Thor, Victoria, and the false sense of victory. Rebecca changed the magazine in the pistol. The metallic sound echoed in the silence of the basement. The weight of the weapon was comforting, like reuniting with an old friend. Years pretending to be an ordinary librarian, years spent hiding behind books and suppressed smiles. That's over now. On the screens in front of him, traffic and public surveillance cameras showed the Blue Line Bar from various angles. At the back of the parking lot, Bennett's pickup truck. The thermal images showed 3 silhouettes, him and 2 colleagues. Witnesses. Perfect. The clock showed 3:17 a.m., the exact time between drinking and the guard dropping. She smiled. Time to hunt. Sergeant Marcus Bennett yawned, steering his patrol car along County Road 23, a lonely stretch of paved road surrounded by woods. The sun hadn't risen yet. The hangover was making him irritable. With one hand on the steering wheel and the other on her cell phone, she was commenting on the protest in Meadowbrook. People were holding signs, "Justice for Thor." He laughed loudly, spitting out the rest of his coffee. "Those idiots don't know what discipline is," he muttered, recalling the scene from the morning. The sound of the gunshot, the woman's gaze. "I thought it was funny. I thought I had won." The cell phone vibrated. Message from Lieutenant Pierce. "Mind your own business. The Internal Affairs Department is watching." Before he could answer, something flashed on the track ahead. Too late. The tires burst with a sharp crack. The vehicle skidded, spun around and plunged into the ditch. The dented hood was emitting steam. Blood was dripping from Bennett's nose as he tried to reach the radio. Central, police officer injured. County Road 23, Kilometer 1. Silence, static only. He tried his cell phone. No signal. The fog was beginning to engulf everything, and then he listened. A metallic sound, something rolling on the asphalt. What the hell is this? A white smoke began to spread. Professional. Controlled. Military. He pulled out his weapon and stumbled out of the vehicle. "Police! Show yourself!" His voice cracked. A shadow moved through the mist. Tall, precise, silent. The electric flash of a stun gun streaked through the air. Bennett's gun fell, and a sharp crack broke his wrist. The pain made him scream. But the figure before him did not respond. It simply moved forward, a shadow with a covered face and cold eyes. And in that instant, Sergeant Marcus Bennett finally understood who was hunting him. Sergeant Marcus Bennett's yell was cut short by a sharp elbow strike that crushed his nose. Blood gushed out, staining his blue uniform. He staggered back, trying to reach for the spare knife strapped to his boot. "You're dead. Can you hear me? Dead." The figure before him moved with the fluidity of a trained predator. A firm hand gripped his armed arm, twisting it until his tendons screamed. The metallic sound of the knife falling echoed through the fog. Then a brutal blow threw him against the car door. The metal crumpled, and the darkness flickered in flashes of pain. Plastic cable ties snapped shut around his wrists before he could react. "No. Please." Bennett's arrogance evaporated, replaced by the primal fear of someone who finally understands the cost of their actions. A cold voice whispered in his ear, the same soft voice of the librarian he had humiliated. But now it carried the icy tone of the sentence. "This is for Thor." Something metallic fell onto his chest. A USB drive. The trunk slammed shut with a snap, plunging it into darkness. Outside, only the sound of the engine driving away could be heard. And then, absolute silence. When another patrol car found him hours later, the sun was already scorching the horizon. Bennett's face was swollen, with purple bruises scattered across his body. But the real blow was yet to come. The flash drive contained the complete video from the body camera, which they had sworn was lost. In the images, Thor is sitting calmly, Rebecca Hayes with her hands raised, and the racist and provocative voice of Bennett himself before he fired. No threat, no attack. Only the sound of gunshots. By noon, the video had already become a national trend. The hashtag, Justice for Thor, was trending on social media. TV channels replayed the crime on a loop, while Colonel Raymond Fisher tried to contain the scandal in an emergency press conference. Reporters bombarded him with questions about evidence tampering, missing files, and corruption within the organization. The department's perfect facade began to crumble before the cameras. Miles away in a motel on Interstate 77, Rebecca Hayes watched everything in silence. 3 screens displayed the chaos: TV broadcasts, police radio reports, and social media streams. She had exchanged her tactical uniform for simple civilian clothes. The hands still bore the reddened knots, the only proof of the violence of the early morning. On one of the screens, protesters were gathered in front of the 5th Precinct in Meadowbrook. Posters displayed Thor's photo alongside other victims of police brutality. The hashtag was growing by the minute. "They thought they could bury the truth," he murmured. The laptop beeped. An encrypted message appeared in the corner of the screen. "Package received. Phase 2 in progress. Sender, a former contact of the Special Tactical Force." A small smile formed on his face. Bennett was just the first piece. The warning, the clear message was that the blue wall was not insurmountable. On another screen, the hospital. Bennett lay on a bed, bandaged, staring at each shadow as if fear had finally learned its name. The uniformed bully was now trembling at the sound of the nurse's footsteps. Meanwhile, police were mobilizing patrols to search motels and inns in the vicinity of Meadowbrook. None of them would even come close. That run-down place, where the receptionist accepted cash and asked no questions, was invisible to the system. And invisibility was Rebecca Hayes's specialty. The encrypted map on his computer showed the search routes. The vehicles were driving around in circles. Her tracks were clean, cold as steel. Meanwhile, Bennett's files were spreading across the internet. Suppressed reports, filed complaints, audios and photos. All the dirt exposed to the light of day. His name was becoming synonymous with shame, and with him came the next targets. The blue line that protected the corrupt was beginning to break down. On one of the monitors, images of the accident site were displayed. Nothing left behind, no fingerprints, no bullet residue. The Special Tactical Force taught them how to disappear, and she never forgot. The sun rose, gilding the motel room as Rebecca watched the chaos she had orchestrated. The beating he gave Bennett was not revenge. That was a strategy, the first piece of a chain reaction that would destroy an entire system. Hours later, already at night, the scene changed. In the Wilmington Industrial Port, a labyrinth of abandoned warehouses and rusty docks, a fast ship transport van moved through the shadows. Rebecca Hayes, her shoulder still throbbing beneath the bandages, followed the trail left by Captain Victoria Kane's last coordinates. He parked the van behind an abandoned mechanic's shop and climbed the outside stairs of a neighboring building. From above, the concrete warehouse stretched out before her, covered windows, armed guards, discreet trucks coming and going, the heart of the operation, what Thor had sensed from the beginning. And on that silent night, Rebecca Hayes knew exactly what she needed to do. The war was no longer just beginning, she was already winning. The thermal display revealed multiple heat signatures moving inside the shed. 8 bodies, perhaps more, clustered around large cold blocks, shipping containers or crates. "Let's see what you're hiding," murmured Rebecca Hayes, adjusting the zoom with precision. Through the lens, I saw armed men, uniformed in tactical gear, moving in synchronized fashion. Former members of paramilitary groups, now working on illegal contracts. They were pushing boxes marked with Charlotte Police Department seals, loading them into unmarked white vans. The labels stamped "Seizure" made it clear. Official evidence was being diverted to the black market. Rebecca observed the patrol patterns for 10 minutes, memorizing shifts, routes, and gaps. Then the advance began. She rappelled down the opposite side of the building, using shadows and rusty structures to avoid being seen. The precise cut of his pliers opened a silent gap in the wire fence. It passed by her like smoke. The warehouse's side door was electronic, equipped with an RFID reader. She removed a small device attached to her belt, technology restricted to use by the Special Tactical Force, and placed it against the dashboard. A discreet beep. The green light flashed. The lock unlocked. The inside of the warehouse smelled of rust and solvent. Huge shelves reached the ceiling, crammed with boxes of evidence. Many of them bore labels indicating recent seizures: cocaine, rifles, ammunition. Everything that should have been under the custody of the state was now about to disappear. Rebecca installed small cameras in dark corners. The infrared lights began to flash, transmitting in real time to your encrypted cell phone. She continued forward, crouching among the shadows, until she found a server room covered in dust. Perfect. He plugged in a USB drive and started downloading the transport manifests and financial transactions. While the files were flowing to the device, she installed trackers in the newest boxes, small camouflage transmitters that would send signals even if they crossed borders. A faint sound broke the silence. A shadow moved in the doorway. A guard, rifle lowered, practiced gait, watchful gaze. Before he could even breathe, Rebecca was already behind him. The grot wire penetrated close to the neck. A movement. Silence. She dragged the body behind a pile of boxes, but the metal charger slipped from her vest, clinking on the floor. "Did you hear that?" someone shouted. "Sector 3! Check it out!" Beams of flashlights swept across the room. Rebecca crouched down behind a forklift. One of the guards approached the fallen body. "We have an injured man. Intruder on the premises." Chaos ensued. Fluorescent lights exploded in the ceiling. The shadows gave way to gunfire. Rebecca's first shot struck one of the mercenaries in the neck as he turned the corner. The second, the partner's eye, before he could call for backup. She moved as she had been trained, silently, without hesitation. "She's an ex-military," someone shouted. "Watch your back!" A well-aimed shot struck her left shoulder, sending her crashing against a concrete pillar. The pain tore at his flesh, but the training prevailed. Inspire, focus, react. The men were trying to surround her. She looked up and saw the industrial gas pipes running along the ceiling. He aimed with the spare M4. 3 quick shots. The gas hissed, filling the air. Rebecca ran towards the drainage gallery, whose cover she had identified during the initial reconnaissance. "She's heading for the tunnels. Stop her!" they shouted. Grenades were armed. Fire in the hole. The leap came instinctively. She fell into the opening seconds before the explosions. The impact of the fire made the warehouse shake. The flames reached the pipes, and the entire building became a fireball. The heat invaded the gallery. Rebecca crawled through the dust-filled tunnels, blood trickling from her shoulder, her breathing steady. Up ahead, the moonlight from Wilmington Harbor filtered through the drainage grates. He pushed them forcefully. The rusted metal gave way. The fresh air filled his lungs. Behind it, secondary explosions transformed the horizon into an orange spectacle. The flames consumed everything: evidence, weapons, secrets. Screams echoed through the fire and steel, but none of the men who were on that side of the shed survived. The reflection of the flames flickered in her eyes as she limped away, her uniform covered in soot and blood. The information stored on his flash drive was enough to expose the network of corruption, smuggling, and arms laundering that fueled the system. And more importantly, she had disrupted the supply chain, cutting off millions of dollars in illegal supplies. The forest surrounding the port gradually swallowed it up, while police cars and fire trucks sped past on the main road. Rebecca Hayes disappeared into the shadows, taking with her the only thing that fire could not destroy: the truth. Rebecca Hayes's shoulder throbbed, requiring medical attention, but she knew people for that, people who didn't ask questions and who understood the value of silence. He had survived worse injuries in places where the only luxury was continuing to breathe. Among the trees, he watched the glow of the burning warehouse. The fire was engulfing the building, and now police cars and news crews were crowding the perimeter. Cameras broadcast live what remained of a secret operation. By morning, the entire country would be wondering what exactly the Charlotte Police Department was keeping in an abandoned warehouse at the port of Wilmington. Questions that no one there would have been able to answer. Dawn was breaking over the industrial district when Rebecca discreetly entered the upper floor of the old Morrison printing house, now transformed into a support center. Dust mingled with the smell of antiseptic. In a corner, Dr. Eleanor Foster worked silently, her nimble, steady fingers stitching up the bullet wound in Rebecca's shoulder. "You're lucky," Eleanor murmured, her voice hoarse with the strength of someone who had stitched flesh together on the battlefield. "Half a centimeter lower, and we'd be having a different conversation." She pulled the thread with surgical precision and tied another knot. Rebecca remained motionless, her tactical uniform open to the waist. On an unstable table, the laptop hummed, displaying files extracted from the warehouse server. The air in the room was a mixture of the metallic smell of blood, alcohol, and old paper. "How many times have you patched me up?" Rebecca asked, without moving a muscle. "Lots of." Eleanor adjusted her glasses, raising an eyebrow. "Victoria used to say you had a talent for getting into trouble." She was right. The silence that followed weighed more than the pain. The computer sound broke the pause. Files and folders began to appear on the screen, shipping manifests, bank records, and internal communications. Rebecca leaned in, her gaze as sharp as ever. "Look at this. Colonel Raymond Fisher's signature. Direct orders to divert seized weapons to shell companies. It has dates, names, and account numbers." Eleanor finished dressing the wound, adjusting the bandage. "That's enough to bury the man. Only if the public sees it." Rebecca picked up a disposable cell phone. Time to call Sarah. The deep, unmistakable voice of Sarah Mitchell, host of the Truth Voice Network, echoed from the other end of the line. Decades denouncing police corruption without ever showing his face. "Send everything," she ordered. "Full broadcast tonight at 8 p.m. They're going to try to silence you, Sarah. Honey, they've been trying for 30 years. Sarah Mitchell's laugh was the kind that hurts with irony. "Let them try again." While Eleanor stored the medical instruments, Rebecca began reinforcing the secure house. He installed motion sensors on the doors, armed makeshift alarm devices, and positioned weapons in strategic locations. Every inch of that place now breathed readiness. "Escape routes?" Eleanor asked, checking the windows. "3, Rebecca replied without hesitation. Access to the roof of the neighboring building, an underground tunnel to the subway shaft, and a hidden garage behind the loading dock. You've always been meticulous. Eleanor helped her position a sniper rifle near the back exit. What if things go wrong? We parted ways. You through the tunnel, me by the high road, meeting at point 2 in 2 hours. The clock showed 7:50 p.m. Sarah Mitchell's voice would soon fill the country. They gathered around a modified radio, the electric hiss anticipating the inevitable. Good evening, seekers of truth. The broadcast has begun. Sarah's voice was firm and sharp. Today, we will reveal the inner workings of a police corruption network and arms trafficking within the force. She cited names, values, companies, and signed orders. He presented the evidence with surgical clarity. Colonel Raymond Fisher personally authorized the sale of over 300 confiscated weapons to extremist groups, including regional militias. The air seemed to vibrate. And the evidence is here. Signed manifestos, confirmed bank transfers. Suddenly, the sound cut out. White noise took over the radio. "No!" cried Rebecca, adjusting the dial. "No, no, no!" A deep, dry rumble echoed in the distance. The ground vibrated. The windows of the printing shop shook. Eleanor ran to the window, binoculars in hand. A column of smoke rose from downtown Wilmington. "Vehicle explosion. At least 10 blocks to the east," he said, his voice breaking. Rebecca gripped the vest, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. They descended the stairs at a combat pace and entered the adapted civilian vehicle. The engine roared. The streets were still deserted. When they arrived, the scene was already one of war. Firefighters cordoned off the area. The charred car was still emitting smoke. Sirens, onlookers, cameras, and a tense silence among those present. Rebecca Hayes watched the fire from a distance, her jaw clenched. I knew what that meant. Sarah Mitchell's voice had been silenced, but the echo of truth, that is not yet there. The red Honda Accord was still burning in the middle of the street. Flames danced against the dark sky, while firefighters and onlookers kept their distance. The heat had subsided enough for paramedics to approach, but the smell of burnt fuel still filled the air. Rebecca Hayes watched in silence, her face motionless, but her gaze incandescent. "The brakes were broken," said one of the rescuers, lowering his voice. He had no chance to stop. Instant death before the fire. Dr. Eleanor Foster placed her hand on Rebecca's arm, offering support, but the touch received no reaction. They watched as the firefighters controlled the last remaining flames. More people were crowding together in the distance. Among them, Rebecca recognized an unmistakable silhouette. Sergeant Marcus Bennett, who had been suspended from duty, was wearing civilian clothes. Their eyes met, and his smile was a cut. "They don't even try to hide it anymore," Eleanor murmured, her voice hoarse with disgust and fear. The tremor began in Rebecca's hands. It wasn't panic, it was fury, a cold, precise rage that surged up his arms like molten steel. The wound in his shoulder pulsed in the same rhythm as his heart, but his entire body felt like a weapon at the ready. She clenched her fists. The trembling stopped. The face transformed into something unbreakable. "Enough with the broadcasts," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Now it's war." The dashboard of Eleanor's grey SUV read 3:17 a.m. when they parked in front of the safe house. The smell of burning plastic and wood hit them even before they went down. "Wait here," Rebecca ordered, drawing her weapon, but Eleanor was already by his side, medical kit in hand. Neither of them obeyed orders anymore, only instincts. The front door hung broken at its hinges. Inside, a scene of destruction, overturned tables, walls marked by bullet holes, the floor covered in soot, euophidia, a gasoline. "They took everything," said Eleanor, kicking the remains of a monitor. "Backup discs, cameras, communication. How did they find us?" Rebecca did not respond, his gaze fixed on something on the opposite wall. 3 red X's, carved deep into the plaster, the mark of the militia. The Red Watch. "Colonel Fisher's guard dogs," she said through gritted teeth. Eleanor's self-control broke down. This is bad. It's terrible. They have everything, Rebecca. Our evidence, our contacts, our escape plans. We need to get out of here, hit the road, disappear off the map. No! The word came out like a cut. We didn't run away, we hunted. The silence that followed was heavy and pure as lead. Rebecca unlocked the encrypted phone and opened an anonymous tracking app. Within minutes, he located the militiaman's hideout, Rancho Hollow Creek, 30 kilometers away, near the border with South Carolina. Former cattle ranch, now converted into a logistics center for arms trafficking and hate operations. Protected by politicians, shielded by the police. Eleanor recognized the sparkle in her friend's eyes. What's the plan? They think we're just civilian drug dealers trying to survive, right? Okay. So let's sell them weapons. Rebecca began to gather the remaining equipment. Revolvers, sniper rifles, smoke grenades, enough to set up an ambush. Do you still remember what your storefront looked like? Maria Santos, from Brazilian Connections, a specialist in Soviet weaponry from the 1980s, responded to Eleanor, already assuming the character. But they will be on alert. They are waiting for terrified civilians, not soldiers. The sun was beginning to peak over the horizon when the grey SUV sped along the back roads. Cracked asphalt, abandoned fields and biting fog. Hollow Creek Ranch appeared before them like a wound in the middle of the woods. Wooden sheds, rusty tractors, surveillance cameras spinning on tall masts. Armed men patrolled with military discipline. The main gate creaked open. Derek Hoffman, a tall man with a shaved head and militia tattoos running up his neck, walked to the car. 2 guards flanked him. "Mrs. Santos," he said, his tone falsely cordial. "I heard your company deals in interesting parts, but your security guard wasn't on the list." His gaze landed on Rebecca, assessing, provoking. "My personal security," Eleanor replied in impeccable English, with the slight rehearsed accent of an international negotiator. "After the recent incidents, I don't travel without it." Derek maintained a steady gaze for a few seconds, then smiled. "Fair enough. Come in." They went through the gate. The interior of the ranch resembled a military outpost. Stacked boxes, modified vehicles, communication antennas, and men patrolling with automatic rifles. As Eleanor began the conversation about special shipments and freight, Rebecca analyzed everything. The escape routes, the number of guards, the layout of the containers, the weapons caches. Every glance, every breath she took was calculated. She wasn't there to negotiate. He was there to finish them all off. "I need to check the storage space," Rebecca Hayes said in a low voice, with the neutral tone of someone used to lying under pressure. "Standard procedure." Derek Hoffman made a distracted gesture with his hand. "Brock will accompany you. Stay exactly where he tells you to." The tall, sweaty man led her through the narrow corridors of the Hollow Creek Ranch, past stacked ammunition crates and diesel generators. As she walked, Rebecca discreetly placed micro-explosive charges in vital areas of the complex, behind electrical panels, under fuel tanks, and in the structural bases of the walls. Each charge was small, about the size of a cell phone battery, but its impact would be devastating. In the last room down the hall, she found what she was looking for: weapons from the Charlotte Police Department, still sealed in evidence bags, pistols, rifles, grenades, all stolen directly from official depots. There were also panels with photos of activists and journalists, their faces crossed out with red X's, targets of the militia. In the center of the mural, his own image, Rebecca Hayes. Priority elimination. A crackling sound in the hallway. Brock Good and Esquina. She didn't even breathe. The blade slid from his sleeve and slit his throat in one clean motion. The body fell, and she caught it before the sound betrayed her presence. He dragged the corpse to a dark corner and wiped the blade on his shirt. Through the earpiece, Eleanor's signal came in 3 short clicks. Time to act. Rebecca pressed the detonator. The first explosions echoed at the same instant that the tear gas grenades launched by Eleanor filled the main room. Chaos ensued immediately. Screams, gunshots, smoke. The walls trembled as the charges beneath the tanks ignited the fuel. Derek Hoffman and his men reacted by firing blindly. The fire spread quickly. The bunker turned into a hell. The flames licked at the ammunition boxes, causing cascading detonations. "Move!" Rebecca shouted, providing cover for Eleanor with an assault rifle snatched from one of the militiamen. Bullets sliced through the air like blades. The back wall collapsed, burying 3 men under concrete and fire. They ran towards the underground tunnel they had identified hours earlier, an escape route for the militia itself. The sound of the explosions echoed behind them. Thick black smoke covered the sky as they emerged on the other side, breathless and covered in soot. Hollow Creek Ranch burned like a collapsing star. The flames reflected in Rebecca's eyes. No regrets, no fear. The tunnel ended near the road leading to the Wilmington port area. They got into the grey SUV and drove off in silence, with only the sound of the engine and heavy breathing. A few blocks from the old Truth Voice Network station, Sarah Mitchell's brick building stood out in the shadows. Dark, abandoned, but 2 police department vehicles were parked outside, headlights off, engines cold. "They're keeping something in there," Eleanor murmured, adjusting her holster. "Or someone." Rebecca coldly observed her surroundings. 4 visible cameras, 2 hidden, all connected to the police station's electrical grid. He erected a small homemade PEM device. "That will give us 30 seconds. They moved through the shadows, using alleyways and graffiti-covered walls as cover. The movements were precise, methodical, 2 experienced shadows operating in sync. Rebecca attached the PEM to the power box. A brief blue flash, followed by an electric crackle. The entire block was plunged into darkness. 30 seconds until the generator," he murmured. Her hands were already working on the electronic lock for the back door. A metallic click. "Open." Shouts came from the front of the building. "Hey! Check the funds." A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. Rebecca pulled out 2 anesthetic darts, took a deep breath, and fired. The first guard fell. The second suffered the same fate. No sound. "Help me move them," said Eleanor, dragging the first body behind a dumpster. They tied both of their hands with plastic cable ties and took their radios. Inside, the air was thick with dust and memories. Photos of Sarah Mitchell on the walls, smiling with microphones, protesting in the streets, denouncing the powerful. Journalism awards covered in soot, and a coffee mug with lipstick marks still lay on the table. "Concentration," Rebecca murmured, suppressing the weight of her anger. They had a purpose. The transmission room remained intact, a sanctuary frozen in time. Analog equipment was mixed with improvised digital systems. Eleanor sat down at the main console, adjusting the satellite. Rebecca turned on the transmitter. The growing hum of the old vacuum tubes filled the room. Sarah Mitchell's voice would no longer echo through that microphone, but her truth was about to be reborn. "This equipment has seen better days," murmured Dr. Eleanor Foster, turning worn knobs and reconnecting tangled cables, "but the signal strength is still good." She tended to it as if it were an altar. Rebecca Hayes nodded silently, connecting a hard drive labeled Truth V3 to the system. "How long until we're on air?" 5 minutes to align the antenna and free up the frequencies. We'll need to cover everything, AM, FM, digital, and even the TV signal. They'll track us down quickly, not fast enough. Rebecca positioned 3 smartphones on makeshift tripods, calibrating the focus and framing. The Truth Voice Network broadcast room, Sarah Mitchell's former studio, was once again pulsing with electric life. The cracked walls reflected the red light from the recording panel. "Ready when you are," Eleanor said, with the serenity of someone who has operated in war zones. Rebecca took a deep breath, looked at the camera, and nodded. The red light flashed. "The broadcast has begun." "My name is Rebecca Hayes," she said, her voice firm, cold, perfectly controlled. "6 days ago, Sergeant Marcus Bennett killed my partner, Thor, in my backyard. But that was just the beginning. Images filled the screens. The actual video from the police officer's body camera shows Thor sitting docilely while Bennett opened fire. Files from the burned-down warehouse, weapons from the Charlotte Police Department being loaded onto Red Watch militia trucks, photos of Captain Victoria Kane, killed in the line of duty, and Sarah Mitchell's charred car being forced off the road by an official vehicle. These people believed they could bury the truth. That silencing Sarah Mitchell and Victoria Kane would be enough. They were wrong. Rebecca raised her hand, removed her glasses, and then ripped off the wig of her disguise. The military haircut and the scar on his temple were exposed under the harsh studio lighting. "I am Sergeant Major Rebecca Hayes, Special Tactical Force retired. For 20 years I fought against enemies outside this country. Today I fight against them from within, wearing my uniform, badge, and wielding power." She leaned towards the lens, his eyes hard as steel. "I am not asking for justice. I'm taking it." The broadcast ended in the studio, but the videos multiplied automatically. Copies were sent to international servers, alternative media outlets, and social networks. Within minutes, the entire country was watching. Independent news outlets, journalism websites, all taken over by the same video. Thousands of shares per second, an unstoppable digital avalanche. "We need to leave now," Eleanor warned, her eyes glued to the tablet. "It's everywhere. No system can take it down fast enough." While they were dismantling the equipment, Rebecca heard the chaos over the police radio. Desertions, confusion, conflicting orders. Officers resigning live on air, commanders in panic, and Colonel Raymond Fisher's phone went straight to voicemail. As she was leaving through the back, Eleanor's cell phone vibrated. Encrypted message. She read silently and turned pale. "Fisher is planning one last move. Press conference tomorrow. Award ceremony at Charlotte City Hall. Live." Rebecca checked the magazine of the customized M4. Full. A cold smile appeared on his face. Perfect. They disappeared into the shadows while sirens echoed through the city, but it was too late. The truth was out there, setting the whole country ablaze, a spark that no system could extinguish. Charlotte City Hall on Trade Street shone under golden lights. The marble columns reflected the spotlights, and luxury cars piled up in the main roundabout. Journalists, politicians, and business people paraded around with rehearsed smiles, oblivious to the chaos brewing in the streets. Inside the Charlotte Public Works van, discreetly parked on the side street, Eleanor watched the event on multiple screens, each connected to hidden cameras. Security check completed. No suspicious movement, a voice reported over the radio. "Everything's fine," she replied, adjusting the frequency. The images showed waiters, formal officers, champagne glasses, and red carpets, a stark contrast to the filth she and Rebecca had revealed. "Understood," Eleanor said over the phone. Rebecca's voice came soon after, low and precise, moving to the service entrance, initiating infiltration. She moved like a shadow among the buffet staff. The white uniform, impeccable. The seemingly ordinary silver tray concealed a customized M4 pistol and a digital hacking device prepared to connect to the main hall's display system. No spotlight could stop her now. The war had left the shadows, and it was about to begin in front of the cameras. "The Colonel's convoy is approaching," Dr. Eleanor Foster reported over the radio, her tone calm but heavy with tension. "In 3 minutes, the video package will be ready for transmission." Rebecca Hayes confirmed with a brief click on the microphone as she moved through the service corridors of Charlotte City Hall in the city center. She knew every escape route, every blind spot, every camera placement. She had memorized the building's floor plan as if it were a battlefield. The weight of the tactical vest under the waitress uniform provided a strange kind of comfort. In the main hall, the glare of TV cameras mingled with the flashes of cell phones. Businessmen, politicians, and uniformed officers chatted over glasses of champagne and insincere compliments. Sergeant Marcus Bennett stood near the stage, his arm still in a sling, forcing a smile as if he wanted to be seen. Further on, Lieutenant Daniel Pierce walked among the tables, laughing too loudly, his face sweaty with vanity. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats." The announcer's voice echoed through the hall. "The award ceremony will begin shortly." Rebecca positioned herself against the back wall, a discreet shadow cast between silver trays and linen tablecloths. From above, the news cameras adjusted their focus to the stage. Colonel Raymond Fisher made his triumphant entrance, surrounded by an honor guard. The blue uniform gleamed under the spotlights, the rows of medals jingled with every step. He seemed confident, almost theatrical. A man accustomed to being applauded. The audience rose to their feet in applause. "All the cameras are in position," Eleanor confirmed over the secure line. "The projection system is synchronized, awaiting your signal." The ceremony began with all the pomp and circumstance befitting a state. The honor guard presented flags. A singer sang the national anthem. Local politicians took turns at the podium, extolling the department's commitment to integrity and public service. Rebecca's face remained impassive, but her jaw betrayed her fury. Each word sounded like poison. These men would never know what true sacrifice was. He thought of Thor, of Victoria, of Sarah, all dead for daring to expose the truth. "It is with immense pride," announced the Master of Ceremonies. "We are presenting the Community Integrity Award to the man who represents the best of our public safety, Colonel Raymond Fisher." Applause echoed like thunder. Fisher adjusted his jacket and went up on stage with feigned modesty. Rebecca removed the remote trigger hidden under the tray. "Clear signal," Eleanor reported. "Ready whenever you want." The microphone hissed. "When I think about police integrity," the colonel began. Rebecca pressed the button. The hall instantly plunged into darkness. The emergency lights cast bluish shadows, and the giant screens behind the stage lit up. On the screen, Thor appeared, wagging his tail, sitting calmly in the backyard. Shortly after, the body camera video of Sergeant Bennett. The gunshot, the muffled scream, the animal's body falling. The silence was absolute. Then came the other images. The clandestine warehouse, weapons from the Charlotte Police Department being loaded onto Red Watch militia trucks. Recordings of Fisher ordering the accident involving Sarah Mitchell. Bank transfers. Deposits made in the name of shell companies. Each revelation came as a bombshell. Sighs, shouting, cameras shaking in the hands of astonished reporters. "It's her!" someone shouted. "The dog's owner!" Rebecca was already on the move. The tray fell to the floor with a crash, glasses shattering. In one continuous motion, she drew her M4 pistol. Fisher fled the stage, followed by disoriented security guards. The room turned into pandemonium. Overturned tables, screams, the dry sound of gunshots and shattering glass. "West exit," Eleanor announced coldly. "I blocked the elevators. He has nowhere to go." Rebecca cut through the crowd like an invisible force. The service uniform was ripped off, revealing the vest and holster. Two security guards tried to intercept her. She knocked them down with sharp, precise blows, straight to the nerves. "Stop her!" Pierce yelled, drawing his gun. But Rebecca had already disappeared through a side door. The sound of his footsteps echoed through the service corridors. Further ahead, Colonel Fisher stumbled between shelves and cleaning carts. Behind them, the metallic clatter of her boots drew closer. "He's heading to the kitchen. 3 security guards on the north flank," Eleanor reported. "Copied," Rebecca replied, drawing her weapon. Hot steam from the abandoned pots hung in the air. Up ahead, the reflection of Fisher's blue dress uniform disappeared through a door. The hunter and the prey were now alone, and the hunt, finally, it had begun. The emergency lights flickered in bluish tones, casting intermittent shadows on the concrete walls. Colonel Raymond Fisher's chest rose and fell unevenly, the sound of his breathing echoing loudly as he gripped his Glock 22 pistol with sweaty hands. "This is Colonel Fisher. I need immediate backup at my location," he shouted into the radio, his voice choked with adrenaline. Only static responded. "Anyone copy? This is the chief. Respond! Nothing." In the monitoring van, Dr. Eleanor Foster's fingers moved quickly across the keyboard. "All channels are blocked. He is completely isolated," Rebecca Hayes calmly and professionally informed him over the phone. Fisher turned sharply upon hearing a sound behind him and fired twice. The flash of gunfire momentarily blinded him. When his vision returned, the hallway was empty, only the metallic echo of the shell casings rolling across the floor. "Show yourself!" he shouted, trying to regain a commanding tone. "That's an order." The answer came in silence. A flash of light cut through the air. The blade pierced his hand with surgical precision, embedding itself in his palm and eliciting a cry of pain. The gun fell to the ground with a thud. Before she could react, Rebecca Hayes emerged from the shadows like a living force. She struck him in the chest with her shoulder, throwing him against a steel door with such force that the metal bent. But Fisher was not finished yet. He had been a boxer in his youth and lunged forward with a precise right hand that struck her chin, causing her head to snap back. A left cross landed on her abdomen, a powerful, calculated blow. Rebecca, however, had already faced tougher combat in deserts and war zones. She absorbed the impact, grabbed his arm, and with a swift movement drove her knee into his ribs. The sound of the bone breaking reverberated through the hallway. As he bent over, she struck him at the base of the skull with a brutal elbow blow. "This is for Thor," he murmured, his words heavy as lead. Fisher stumbled, spitting out blood. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Arfuele. I have contacts, powerful people. They'll hunt you down just like your militia friends." Rebecca moved forward slowly. "The same people who are burning the evidence now." He tried to hit her again. She dodged, grabbed his wrist and twisted with precise technique, his shoulder dislocated with an audible snap. "The same people who ordered the murder of Sarah Mitchell?" His voice was icy. "Or those who shot Victoria Kane? They were threats, Rosnuele, just like you." He stepped back, trying to push her against the wall. Rebecca rolled over from the impact and threw him over her hip. He violently slammed his fist against a metal shelf, knocking over buckets and cleaning supplies. Fisher quickly stood up, grabbing the handle of a mop like a weapon. The baton sliced through the air in a swift stroke. "I protected this city," he shouted between attacks, "kept order while you and your kind tried to destroy it." She intercepted the movement and disarmed him with a clean strike. The dry sound of the palm against his nose echoed. The blood gushed out immediately. "You didn't protect anyone," she said, her gaze unwavering. "It only destroyed those who couldn't fight back." Before he could recover, Rebecca was already behind him, a steel cable unwound from his vest, wrapping itself around the colonel's neck. The pressure was precise, lethal. His fingers scratched at the wire, trying to free himself, but within seconds, his body began to weaken. "Thor couldn't react," she whispered in his ear. "Sarah was unable to react, but I can do it." His body went limp, passed out. Rebecca tied his hands tightly, leaving marks on his wrists, and dragged him through the service corridors. His polished shoes left black streaks on the polished floor. The blue uniform, once a symbol of authority, was now torn and covered in blood. Several federal vehicles were approaching, Eleanor reported. They finally decided to act. "Our evidence is being tracked." "Understood." Rebecca dragged Fisher's lifeless body into the main hall. The chaos inside was absolute. Screams, breaking glass, cameras still recording the corruption video on the big screens. Pierce tried to impose order while Bennett searched for an escape route. She straightened the colonel's torn collar. "Ready for your close-up, boss," he muttered disdainfully. Then he kicked the double doors open with all his might. The loud bang silenced the crowd, and everyone saw what she wanted them to see: the fall of an empire disguised as a police force. The violent impact echoed through the Grand Hall of Charlotte City Hall as Rebecca Hayes dragged the unconscious body of Colonel Raymond Fisher in front of the cameras. She loosened her grip on his shirt collar, letting him fall heavily before the podium where, minutes earlier, he had received the state's highest police honor. The blood that trickled from his broken nose stained his chest, which was covered in medals. Camera flashes exploded like lightning. A scream broke through the collective murmur. Lieutenant Daniel Pierce tried to draw his weapon, but froze when the main doors burst open. FBI agents stormed the hall, wearing tactical vests and black helmets. FBI, everyone on the ground. The sound of metal against marble echoed as Pierce's gun fell to the floor, followed by his hands being handcuffed with plastic zip ties. On the other side, Sergeant Marcus Bennett tried to escape, but was tackled before reaching the exit. Outside, behind the glass doors, hundreds of protesters shouted slogans. The applause and shouts of support grew louder as more federal agents entered. The truth was now before the whole country. 2 days later, the FBI press room in Washington was packed. Reporters jostled each other, microphones piled up in front of the podium. Deputy Director Lauren Whitmore walked to the microphone with firm steps. The stern look behind the glasses betrayed the historical weight of what he was about to announce. "Good morning. Today I can confirm that, in coordination with the Department of Justice, the FBI has filed formal charges against 14 individuals linked to a systemic corruption scheme within the Charlotte Police Department." She held up a stack of documents. Charges include weapons trafficking, formation of militia groups, obstruction of justice, and abuse of authority. The journalist started shouting questions, but she raised her hand, asking for silence. Colonel Raymond Fisher, Lieutenant Daniel Pierce, and Sergeant Marcus Bennett are in federal custody. Evidence confirms they maintained an illegal network to divert seized weapons and sell them to paramilitary groups. Whitmore paused, the sound of cameras replacing the silence. "We also have evidence linking them directly to the death of journalist Sarah Mitchell and the killing of a service dog belonging to a retired Special Tactical Force operative." At the back of the room, Dr. Eleanor Foster watched, arms crossed. The day before, he had spent the entire day testifying before a Senate committee on the militarization of the police. Now, he watched with bitter serenity. The system finally admit what it had always known. The FBI is creating a national task force to audit all evidence and weapons storage facilities of state and local police departments, prosecuted Whitmore. "We expect investigations to expand to other cities in the coming weeks." Elsewhere in the city, in a modest apartment that served as a temporary refuge, Rebecca Hayes watched the press conference on the morning news. The sun streamed through the blinds, casting streaks of light onto his meticulously clean tactical gear. She disassembled and reassembled her weapon calmly, without haste, a gesture of discipline rather than necessity. On the table, a single sheet of paper displayed the phrase that had already gone viral: "Justice isn't given, it's taken by those who have nothing left to lose." The quote circulated across all social media platforms, printed on T-shirts, posters, and murals. Outside, protesters marched down Charlotte's avenues, holding portraits of Thor, the slain German shepherd, and calling for accountability and police reform. Some carried German shepherd stuffed animals tied to black flags, a symbol of resistance. Others repeated the name Rebecca Hayes like a mantra of courage. Eleanor's testimony had ignited something bigger: the creation of Shadow Oath, a national network of veterans and former military personnel dedicated to exposing corruption and protecting civilians. In less than 48 hours, hundreds of volunteers had already signed up. Rebecca put the last magazine in the pistol. The dry click echoed through the room, but brought no satisfaction. The victory was real, but empty, without Victoria Kane to witness it, without Thor to rest at its feet. She walked to the hidden panel in the wall and opened it with a precise touch. Inside, a foam-lined compartment held his weapons and equipment. One by one, she put them back. Each piece had fulfilled its role. The phone vibrated. A message from Eleanor. The task force opened investigations in 6 more states. You started something bigger than all of us. Rebecca did not respond. He grabbed the keys and left. The drive to Fort Jackson National Cemetery took 40 minutes, along back roads and over fog-covered hills. The place was silent, enveloped in a dense peace. She walked to the 3rd row, under a lone oak tree, where a recent gravestone bore the name Victoria Kane, facing east as soldiers often do. Rebecca stood motionless before the grave. The light breeze moved her short hair. Her war was over, but the echo of everything that had begun still lingered. In the streets, in voices, on social media, in each person who now knew that silence can also be a form of resistance. The earth was still damp, the fresh smell of soil mingling with the distant scent of dew. The granite tombstone was simple, unassuming, just the name Victoria Kane, her rank, and the emblem of the Special Tactical Force. Below, a single line engraved with sobriety. She stood for truth. Rebecca Hayes knelt before the grave. Her fingers slowly traced the cold letters, feeling the weight of each groove. The morning dew soaked her trousers, but she didn't move. Birds sang in the distance, and a light breeze stirred the leaves of the solitary oak tree beside the grave. "It's done," he murmured, his hoarse voice almost lost in the wind. The words dissipated into thin air, mingling with the mist that still lingered over the field. She stood there, motionless, indefinitely, without hurry, without needing words. The cell phone vibrated in the pocket, notifying new headlines. More police stations under investigation, more police officers denouncing corruption, more cities in the streets. But none of that mattered there. In that silent patch of land, there was only one soldier paying homage to another. There, the price of justice was engraved in granite and marked on the churned earth. The sun broke through the fog and warmed her face. From some distant spot, a dog barked. The sound made his chest clench, the unmistakable echo of Thor, his loyal companion, now just a memory. He thought of Victoria, bleeding in her arms, but still fighting to deliver the evidence that brought the system down. He thought about the moment he realized that revenge and justice were not the same thing, but sometimes they needed to go hand in hand. Especially, she whispered finally in a firm voice. That word carried everything, victory and loss, sacrifice and new beginnings, the end of a war and the start of something greater. She stood up slowly, brushing the dust from her knees. The cemetery was empty, enveloped in the golden light that was beginning to pierce the mist. Above her, the American flag fluttered atop the flagpole, its shadows dancing over Victoria's grave. A month later, the early spring sun cast long shadows over Trade Street Plaza in Charlotte, now transformed for the opening ceremony. Yellowed leaves danced in the wind and scattered across the newly restored cobblestones. The facades had been painted, new benches installed, and in the center of the square stood a structure covered with a white fabric, surrounded by ribbons and flags. Mayor Catherine Williams approached the podium, her impeccable grey suit contrasting with the golden hue of the morning. She was one of the few authorities who stood firmly by the investigations, even when it cost her political allies. Today, we don't just gather to rename a street, he began, his voice echoing clearly through the loudspeakers. We're here to acknowledge a truth many tried to bury, and to honor those who refused to let injustice thrive in the shadows. The crowd filled every corner of the square, Activists wearing T-shirts with the phrase "Justice for Thor" mingled with uniformed veterans and entire families holding colorful signs. Children were holding small stuffed shepherds. The stations broadcast live, cameras capturing every detail. When they killed Thor, the mayor continued with restrained emotion, they thought they were silencing a threat. Instead, they awakened a movement that exposed decades of corruption and abuse of power. Deep in the crowd, Rebecca Hayes watched silently. The coat's hood partially covered his face, and his sunglasses hid his gaze. She held Thor's identification tag in her pocket, twirling it between her fingers. "The former Colonel Fisher Boulevard," said Catherine, pointing to the newly installed plaque, "bears the name of a man who betrayed his oath. Today, it becomes Justice Way, not just as a tribute, but as a promise." Applause filled the air. Veterans saluted. The children clapped their hands, curious to see what was under the white fabric. Dr. Eleanor Foster then stepped onto the podium, her medals reflecting the sunlight. Since the scandal, he had become the most respected voice in the police reform movement. "I want to talk about silence, Komisu. Not just the silence of those who looked away, but the silence that kills, the one that suffocates the good out of fear." She took a deep breath. That silence ended here, in this city, because one woman refused to accept it. In the middle of the crowd, a teenage girl held up a hand-painted sign. It read, "Silence is violence." Next to it, small paw prints drawn with blue paint. The girl's and Rebecca's eyes met for a moment, a brief, knowing, almost imperceptible nod. The girl smiled. Rebecca simply nodded, knowing she didn't need to say anything more. Justice now had a name, a face, and a history that no one could erase. The teenager returned the wave, straightening her body through the crowd. "While some call her a vigilante," continued Dr. Eleanor Foster, her voice echoing clearly through the loudspeakers, "I call her a symbol of what silence can no longer tolerate. She showed us that justice isn't begged for on our knees. Sometimes you have to take it from the hands of those who made it an instrument of power." The crowd responded with thunderous applause. Parents lifted their children onto their shoulders. A dozen white doves were released, crossing the blue sky above Trade Street Plaza before disappearing over the horizon. Mayor Catherine Williams returned to the podium and held the ceremonial rope. "The moment has come, Annuncio." The canvas fell, revealing a monumental bronze statue of Thor, the German shepherd who gave his life for the truth. The animal was depicted in a vigilant, serene posture, its muscles defined beneath the gleam of the metal, its gaze turned towards the sunrise. At the base, a plaque reflected the golden light of the late afternoon. "May his sacrifice remind us that justice demands courage." Children ran to the base, touching the letters with curious fingers. Veterans saluted. Parents were taking photos. Others left flowers, old collars, and small dog toys at the foot of the monument. From afar, Rebecca Hayes watched from the shade of an oak tree. Her face partially obscured by her hood, she saw repentant former police officers, community leaders, veterans, and protesters, all gathered for the same purpose. An animal-assisted therapy organization had brought in dogs wearing vests that read, "Project Thor." A German shepherd puppy looked directly at Rebecca and whimpered as if it recognized her. The ceremony continued with speeches. Human rights leaders, veterans advocates, and former police officers took to the microphone, speaking about change, courage, and responsibility. His words echoed through the square, mingling with the rustling of leaves and the murmur of the emotional crowd. As the sun began to set, Thor's bronze gleamed in the orange light. The crowd slowly dispersed as cameras were switched off and cables were pulled up. The square fell silent again, with only the rustling of the trees and the distant sound of traffic remaining. Rebecca waited until everyone had left. He walked to the statue and stopped in front of it. The golden reflection of the license plate illuminated his face. She reached out and touched the cold metal. His fingers traced the words, feeling them as one reads a scar. For a moment, it all returned. The warmth of Thor's fur, the sound of night patrols, his steady, protective gaze before the final shot. The square was almost deserted. Long shadows covered Justice Way, coloring the cobblestones in shades of copper and lilac. Rebecca took a step back, took a deep breath, and walked toward the twilight. Her steps were light, but calculated, the silent gait of someone trained to survive. Later, the moonlight bathed the backyard of Rebecca's modest house, illuminating the same lawn where Thor had been patrolling for months. The old planks of the porch creaked as she sat down in the old rocking chair. Her body still ached from the ceremony, but the silence brought a rare kind of peace. The space where the dog used to lie was empty, but she could still see him. The memories were too vivid to fade. A light breeze made the wind chimes ring, gifts from Dr. Eleanor the previous week. The metallic clinking mingled with the hum of the laptop on the table. The screen emitted a bluish light, reflecting in Rebecca's eyes as she reviewed encrypted files, cases, testimonies, transfers, names, fragments of a new investigation. The sound of footsteps on the gravel made her lift her head. She relaxed as she recognized the rhythm. It was Eleanor, carrying 2 steaming mugs. "Becca," said her friend, placing a mug beside her. "Thought you could use something warm after all that." Rebecca acknowledged them with a brief nod, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. The steam rose, mingling with the cold night air. "You were amazing today," Eleanor said after a few seconds of silence, "even with no one knowing you were there." "I wasn't there to be recognized," responded Rebecca, firm. "I just needed to see it end." Eleanor nodded. "Shadow Oath is expanding. We're opening chapters in 12 new cities. We need someone with your experience in command." Before Rebecca could answer, something small and black moved under the chair. A German shepherd puppy with curious eyes and dark fur lay down at her feet. "Thor too is settling in well," Eleanor commented, smiling. "He's learning," Rebecca replied, stroking the puppy's snout. "Still trusts strangers too much, but he'll understand." The chirping of crickets mingled with the distant sound of a passing vehicle. The new driver, one of those retired following the investigations, waved respectfully. Eleanor returned the gesture. Rebecca remained motionless. "Think about the offer," insisted Eleanor. "We really need a leader." Rebecca set the mug down on the table and looked at it. "I was never made to lead. I was made to finish what others can't." "That's enough." Eleanor smiled respectfully. "Had to try. But I understand." She squeezed her friend's shoulder and walked to the car. As the engine drove away down the road, the yard returned to silence. Rebecca opened the laptop again. Thor too rested his head on his foot. The woman's eyes reflected the blue light of the screen as she browsed through the reports. Cases closed, disappearances, silenced witnesses. Everything followed the same pattern. One name stood out among the files: Judge Marcus Bennett, accused of running a child trafficking ring under the guise of a judge. Evidence buried, records falsified, witnesses bribed. Rebecca remained silent. The hand reached down to caress Thor the two. "What do you think, boy?" Cicero. "Ready for some training?" The puppy wagged its tail, alert. She typed a single word on the keyboard. The screen flickered, and the soft sound of the wind chimes mingled with the breathing of the dog as it fell asleep at her feet. Rebecca gazed at the backyard, now bathed in the cool moonlight, the same place where everything had ended and begun. "I wasn't seeking justice, Murmuro. I became justice." Each story like this makes us think about what justice truly means and the price it exacts from those who choose to confront it head-on. There are battles that take place in the streets and others more silent within ourselves. Rebecca Hayes wasn't seeking recognition, only the truth. And somehow that search became a mirror for all those who have ever been silenced, forgotten, or wronged. How many times has silence been imposed as the answer? How many times has the courage of one person changed the course of many? Think about it while the story still resonates. Comment which city or country you're watching from, and share what has most impacted you on this journey. Leave a like to support the channel and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories of resistance, courage, and justice.